Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. I had a frustration about commute earlier today. I was getting ready to sign some contracts with my work, and I realized what the commute would entail. And it got me so frustrated that I actually typed into Google the city with the shortest commute, just to see if I ever decide to pivot my career again. Some ideas out there. And it wasn't exactly the kind of city I was expecting. I was expecting to see something like New York or uh, uh, well, maybe not New York because people do live far away from that, but some very densely packed place, right, where you could literally go downstairs from your apartment and just walk a few blocks. So I was thinking something like that. Never would have crossed my mind that it was Great Falls, Montana, which is not a bad place in my opinion. Um, but there might be something tricky because I thought about what moving there would entail, and I did a few searches about Great Falls. Yeah, obviously, the first thing I tried to look up was the climate of Great Falls. Let's see if we can look that up. Uh, Great Falls climate. And obviously, it can get pretty cold over there. So, January, December, the lows are in the teens. And definitely, I would not want to bring the car that I now drive to Great Falls, right? You know, something funny about my videos, you may have noticed that I sometimes get really nervous when people I know, maybe not a stranger, but people I know come into the home or at the office where I'm recording this. I feel very constrained in how I can talk. And this is something I have to be careful with because I made a mistake just like that not long ago. I was trying to do a job interview, and I made the mistake of going to my favorite Starbucks, in large part because I wanted to show off to one of my friends who worked there about the kind of job that I was interviewing for. I was stupid. And long story short, I was interviewing for a community college, and the interviewer had the good sense to ask me some pointy questions about oddball situations that one might run into in the college, right? A student who wants to talk about sex or some kind of inappropriate subject, how I would respond to that, right? Which could happen, right? I think that's a very good question for a job at a community college. But or what happens if you get if you get an unfair performance review or a student evaluation, right? What would you do, right? I don't want to say that in front of somebody that I'm thinking about dating. Ah, and it created a really awkward situation. Okay, it was just an aside. Something to think about if you ever have an important subject to talk about. Okay, so not the climate there. I have to think about. So it does snow there, but you know what? One reason I'm not terribly worried about this rain, snow, cold weather, and all that is that I'll actually have a decent place to live over. The cost of living here. Let's look at it. That's the next thing I looked up. Cost of living is like 12.1% lower than we're here in. Let's do Phoenix. See what it so we can make a comparison because I can scarcely barely afford to live here. Uh, Compared to national average, we are like 9% higher. So a good 25% or so difference between the two. So just try to, if you live in Phoenix, try to imagine. I don't want to say how much I pay for various things. Just try to imagine everything being 25% lower, right? I think a lot of things would open up. I probably still want to live with roommates, not because I have to, but because I find it really accelerates some connection building sometimes. Although here in Phoenix, it's a little bit tricky. Everybody just hides out, right? So even my roommate and I, it doesn't help that we have some differences in lifestyle, right? One of my roommates is pregnant, and obviously there are certain things that she would like to avoid, and I have food allergies, right? And so the kitchen can be a weird place to go for both of us, right? Doesn't help that there's that, but even when stuff like that doesn't isn't a thing, it's we still have this individualistic mentality, right? It's probably worse in Phoenix than over in Montana, I want to say, in some ways, right? The other thing I like to look at, because I obviously want to be able to find food that's suitable for me. And also, I like hanging around people who are healthy eaters. So this is a weird thing that people might think I'm crazy for looking up. But every time I consider moving to a city, I look at what kind of grocery stores they have around town, just to get a sense of the climate of eating habits over there, if you will. And it's not out there. There's no Whole Foods there. Uh, but it's not crazy either. People aren't relying on the gas station in order to eat, right? I guess I could also look up what kind of restaurants there are over there. But there's probably a lot of mom and pop shops. Yep, that's what I figured. So it's also a great way, and with the cost of living so low there, I could probably actually afford to go out to restaurants and network with. That's been a big soreness of mine here in the Phoenix area, not being able to network because the cost of doing that, the cost of basic living has already chewed up everything, and you add to that the cost of eating out is also not very friendly either, right? And not to mention, when I first moved here, I was trying to build up that career right, in my art part. I was bankrolling that. Now that I've already primed the pump, if you will, right? In fact, I scarcely have any more space, right? Okay. The other thing that I looked at was the geography of where Great Falls sits on a map. And I'll get to why I'm doing that in a second. Great Falls, Montana on a map. One of the biggest soreness of mine about Phoenix is that you could drive hours and hours and hours and hours, and it still looks the same. It's still a desert environment, still similar climate, still similar demographics, right? Mostly Hispanic. Not anything wrong with them, but sometimes I want to network with other people as well. But over in Great Falls, you have a considerable number of big cities that are within an hour or two, right? Missoula, which I actually spent a few months living in during the pandemic, and Billings, and my favorite, Wallace, Idaho, which is considerably different from any of that, right? And another town that I spent a couple days in is Lincoln, Montana. That's where the Unabomber lived for 30 years. But I didn't. I liked Lincoln, Montana, in terms of the locals. There was something else I didn't like, though. It's the reason the Unabomber loved living there. It was hard to get any connectivity. No Wi-Fi. You had to drive somewhere just to connect to Wi-Fi. I had recorded a video, and I tried to upload it in my hotel room. I left the computer on overnight, and when I woke up, it was still only 30-some%. And I ended up having to drive like to a library. I think it was actually the library that the Unabomber loved to hang out in. He would go there to research how to build his bombs and to research the reference books on where to mail them. And I had to go there to upload my videos, right? And then I was like, oh, this is why the Unabomber really loved living here, right? Nobody bothered by technology, right? But one thing I learned the hard way to look up is how far do you have to drive before you get to a different climate, in terms of both the climate and in terms of the demographics climate, right? A small town versus big city, the demographics of people, not that I dislike any particular demographic, whether it be age or race or anything like that. Sometimes I just need a change. Right here in the Arizona area, you could drive for hours and hours, and you still get the same demographics, right? And you still get the same kind of climate, the desert environment, and all that. And you just feel really lost when it's like that, right? So today, I'm actually missing out on a hiking meetup today because it's like a 2-hour drive away. And then by the time I get there, it's the same kind of people. I don't get how people can spend their whole lives driving here. I get the average Arizonan, how much time? Actually, can we look that up? Average drive time for Arizona. I don't know if we can even look that up. Takes 7 hours to drive across Arizona. That's not what I meant. I meant like the average person living in it. How much time do they spend in their car? Let me know if you can look up that statistic. It's going to be a really really depressing statistic, I would imagine. And we don't have really good public transportation either. Right now I live in Apache Junction, and I so much wish we had a rail that goes from here to Phoenix, right, and to go from east as well to New Mexico or Texas, right. We really should, right. Um, but and then it's not far from my favorite Wallace, Idaho either. Let's see directions to here. Let's do Wallace. It's like a 4 hour drive around the upper limit of what I would consider a trip that I might take during a long weekend, right? So it's still doable. It's not something that requires a vacation to do. Like here to Wallace would be like, oh, that's something I do for a vacation, right? And I might not even consider driving there, right? Might fly there if I were thinking of going there, right? Um, but the other thing, obviously, I looked at is the industries over there. Great Fall, Montana Industries. But you know what? I'm not terribly concerned about that because I learned that so one of the biggest problems I had this past year is that I had a dream job, but a nightmare of a city in terms of demographics, in terms of climate, in terms of scenery to view. And what is this? It's a prison camp of some sort. I mean, at prison camps, you might really love your work, but it comes in the substrate of all this other nonsense, right? And but they do have I googled it at some point. They do have a university here. Uh, Largest employer in Great Falls. Benefits health system. They might do some kind of computer programming kind of work, right? So I could look into that. University of Great Falls is probably the first place I'll gravitate to. Now, one thing I learned the hard way is that when you go to apply for these jobs and you're sitting in another city, you're sitting in Apache Junction looking at a job in Great Falls, Montana. Obviously, people are going to ask you why Great Falls, right? I've learned to keep the answer as short as possible. Less is more there. I got family commitments. Without going into who or what kind of commitments, nobody's going to ask that. I got family commitments. And that's it. And then you keep your mouth shut. And last time I got a little bit too elaborate. I was on my way to Phoenix and I was getting out of Seattle. At the time, I thought Phoenix would be a great place. The cost of living is a lot less than Seattle. What I forgot to do is kind of adjust the cost of in Seattle. You can comfortably live out of your car like all year round, right? You can't in Phoenix. It's you kind of have to adjust for that, right? And also the commutes are a lot longer too, right? When you adjust for those two variables, the cost of living isn't so beautiful anymore, right? Obviously, not too many people are going to think about adjusting for the fact that they can't live in their car, right? So that's not something I would tell the interviewer, right? Obviously, in Great Falls, you have to also adjust for that, but I would say it's similar, right? What was the climate again? Except that it's the wintertime where you need a place, right? So I would say from April until October, you could live in your car, right? That's kind of similar to Phoenix, just the reverse, right? All right. So uh, and then the commutes are low. The only thing I didn't really look up is the opportunity for social connectivity. I could go to meetup.com and look up Great Falls, because the other part of the commute here is that all the activities are always long drives away, right? I can't find anything here, but you know what? This might not be the end of the world because that might mean people are better at organically connecting with one another over in Great Falls rather than go into online dating or anything like that, right? Which is what I also like. I guarantee Wallace, Idaho probably doesn't show up on here either, but it's not hard to network with people over there. You just go there, right? And especially with the cost of living so much lower, and you can afford to actually go to a restaurant, right? You don't need Meetup.com when you live in a situation like that, right? This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum.